All right, here we go.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live. We are very excited to be hosting this. I am Karenna Gore. I am the founder and executive director of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And we're delighted that you chose to join us today as we talk about food and faith, and particularly the upcoming Food Summit hosted by the United Nations. We are very honored and excited that we are going to be hosting a series of dialogues that will draw from the best of the world's faith and wisdom and indigenous traditions to try to help us grapple with this challenge of changing our food system so that we can all live in a better way and in balance with nature and life on Earth for generations to come. So I'm very honored to be joined here by Andrew Schwartz, who is the Director of Sustainability and Global Affairs for the Center for Earth Ethics, longtime colleague of mine. Gopal Patel, who is the co-founder and Director of Global Bhumi, and also very close colleague working with us on this series of dialogues for the summit. And Mona Polacca, an elder of Hopi, Havasupai, and Tewa lineages, who is a wonderful wisdom keeper. We're honored by her presence as well, and we're also honored that she is a senior fellow with the Center for Earth Ethics. And so I want to just say a word about the center and frame this conversation, and then turn it over and hear from everyone here. Also, let me say, in the spirit of food, it is, after all, something that each of us rely on to sustain our bodies every day. And we have invited folks to bring a snack. I brought potato chips. It was interesting to think what to bring, because obviously you want to put your best face forward on Facebook Live. And many of us have food choices that we feel less comfortable about because of the nature of food systems. And that goes from everything from supply chains to the involvement of labor and packaging and the nature of whether things are transported over big distances and so on, and the use of fossil fuels. So we're going to get to all that, but just to say that I do snack on potato chips. These are from a local, not so local, but in the Catskills, not very far away, farm. And so I just want to invite folks to share in that way, and feel free to enjoy your snack or your cup of whatever you've made while you are listening to our conversation. The Center for Earth Ethics draws from faith and wisdom and indigenous traditions to confront the ecological and climate crises that our world is facing. The way we see this is not only that we are on a trajectory that is dangerous and unsustainable for lives on Earth now and in the future, but also that we have an opportunity to make such a better world and such a better way of life and quality of life for all. And so there's no area more than food in which faith traditions, and that, of course, we particularly include and lift up indigenous traditions, and that have knowledge to offer. And we are looking to this set of dialogues that we will be launching, and please do register for them and join us for them, to establish that channel of communication with policymakers around the United Nations in order to facilitate the wisdom from the world's ancient faith and wisdom and indigenous traditions, to bring that to bear on this difficult set of challenges with the food system. In particular, Center for Earth Ethics has done trainings, ministers trainings, we call them. They're for mid-career faith leaders from all faiths. And we did one focused on food a few years ago. And it was very interesting to hear not only about science and policy, the data and the different aspects of technology and so on, but also the sacred texts and teachings, the rituals and ceremonies, the elements of pastoral care and ancestral wisdom that can be brought to bear on this issue of food. And so with that, I'd like to turn it to the person that was actually the project manager of that wonderful training that we did, which was in collaboration with the Climate Reality Project and also the Methodist Theological Seminary of Ohio. And that is Andrew Schwartz, also our Director of Sustainability and Global Affairs, who is managing this very exciting set of dialogues. So Andrew, can you please tell us about the United Nations Food Summit and the dialogues?
Absolutely. Hey, thanks, Karenna. It's really fun to be here and do this. The Food Systems Summit is something that Secretary General of the United Nations, Gutierrez, called for this year as a way to engage all of civil society on food systems. And he's looking cross-sector, he's looking nutritionists, he's looking engineers, industry, development banks, people of faith, local workers to weigh in on the food systems. And I think when we first heard about this, or at least I first heard about it, I was a little curious about why food. And the deeper you go into the systems, you realize just, like you said on the top, Karenna, food is a daily part of our lives, but we rarely think about where that food comes from or what it takes to get to our plates and all the processes involved. And that can be the shipping, that can be the plastic used, that can be, you know, the vast fields and all the production that goes into that, the workers, the people, and then how it informs our cultures, our religions, our traditions. Food is, you know, it's one of those things that for those who have it, it's just a daily given, and it supports every step of our days. And yet there are 1.9 billion food insecure people on the planet right now. Hunger is as bad as it's ever been. And yet there's enough food waste produced annually to feed every hungry person. So it comes to this fundamental question of what are our food systems, who do they service, and how do we make them better for the years to come? And how do we produce food in a way that's sustainable? One of the largest drivers of forest and ecosystem loss in the world right now is food production, because we're mowing down more forest, more plains to produce more protein, especially animal proteins, palm oils, sugars, to supply an ever worsening diet. Though we have more food than we have ever had before, people are as unhealthy as they've ever been and as hungry as they've ever been. And so at a certain point, you need to stop and take a big step back and say, how are our food systems working? How do we make them better? And how do we make them sustainable and just and accessible? And how are we taking a real look back at hunger, which COVID has really exacerbated? How do we, as a global community, come together? And so that's what we're looking to do with these Food Systems Summit dialogues that we're hosting. The summit has been broken down into 5 different action tracks, each track looking at a different aspect of the food system. And so what we're proposing to do is bringing together 5 different dialogues with our partners from the Faith and Food Steering Committee. And those members are Gopal, Patel, who's works with Bhumi Global. We've got Kelly Moulton of the Interfaith Public Health Network. We've got Steve Chu, Buddhist Suchi Alliance. We got Chris Elisars of World Evangelical Alliance. And then we've got Joshua Bassifin, Parliament of World Religions. And finally, last but not least, is Mariam Hussein from Islamic Medical Association of North America. And we've been working together for the last bunch of weeks to organize and put together these cross-sector intersectional dialogues that are drawing from wisdom and spiritual traditions, looking at industry, looking at the UN and these other international NGOs, trying to create this very broad conversation that draws from the best of what each of us have to offer, because there's no one solution to the food systems challenge. This needs to be a community effort, and we need to draw from the best of what each of us have to offer. Now, we're not saying that these dialogues are going to solve any of this, but what we're saying is we want to model the sort of conversation and the sort of analysis and the sort of critique that's necessary to get to the solutions that we need for our food systems and the world going forward. And so if I could, I'd love to ask you, Gopal, and thank you so much for being a part of this effort, to kind of weigh in on why the faith voice is so important to this. Why do we want to engage faith communities on this effort?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Andrew and Karenna. And it's interesting because, as you said, like when we first think about faith and food, we're like, okay, what's the connection? Okay, well, the obvious connection is food is something that connects all faith traditions. You know, we can disagree or agree on different theological, philosophical things, but food brings us together in various ways, whether it's we eat certain kinds of food at moments, or we don't eat certain kinds of food, or we don't eat any food at certain times of the year. You know, it's like food plays such an important role in our faith and spiritual traditions. It's a carrier of culture and history and stories. You know, it just brings us together in a way that really nothing else does, I think, in our religious and spiritual communities. And I think what's interesting about the Food Systems Summit is because, you know, like you said, like the first question is, okay, what can we contribute? Well, up until now, oftentimes the faith and food conversation has been around like, what do you eat and what don't you eat? You know, or when can you eat and when can't you eat? You know, it's been around very much around conversations that, you know, dinner table focused in terms of what can you put on your plate and what can't you? But as you said, Andrew, as you peel back the curtain, so to speak, on food systems as a whole, you get to see that actually food systems touch upon pretty much every major concern that faiths have when it comes to what's going on in the world and things we want to look at and help address, right? And so like the different action tracks which you laid out and the Food Systems Summit are focusing on are things which are very dear to us as people of faith and people of religious and spiritual communities. You know, if you're interested in malnutrition and hunger and poverty, well, that's directly connected to food systems. You know, are we concerned about shifting to sustainable consumption patterns and ensuring that the food that we produce and consume is not just harmful to the environment, but is regenerative, you know, and, you know, is sustainable in every sense of the word. And also to make sure, as you said, Karenna, that labor, the people that produce our food, are treated fairly and properly. You know, that's a real concern for people of faith, to ensure that humans are cared for. You know, I mean, that's one of the central aspects of many faith traditions. And so, as I said, as you peel back the curtain, food systems is almost I would say, one of the key things that can address so many other societal and environmental concerns that faiths are trying to address, you know, whether it's youth or gender or poverty or the environment or labor rights. These are all things that faiths have been working on at a local, national, and global level for, you know, since day one, you know. And so for us to come together to talk about faith and food in the context of the Food Systems Summit, I think we can bring in unique perspectives that other stakeholders may not be able to bring, you know, because we have food, as I said earlier on, as such a central aspect of our lives. It's not an extra. It's not just a dessert or dessert. It's central, you know, it's the main course in many ways of our faith traditions. And so we can bring a perspective that I think others may not be able to fully understand by themselves or not fully appreciate by themselves. And as you said, Andrew, it's not about us saying that the faiths have the answers or the solutions. We know we don't, but we can contribute with private sector, with civil society, with other people to think about, okay, what's going wrong here and how can we help fix these things so all these issues can be addressed. So it's really great that we're organizing these dialogues starting in May, you know, one dialogue for each of the action tracks. And it's going to be great to see what conversations and what points emerge out of those. So thanks so much for organizing them. It's going to be a great number of dialogues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gopal. And Andrew, I noticed you took a bite of the apple, which is also a metaphor, I think. Did you introduce your apple?
No, this is a Cosmic Crisp and comes from Washington State, just up the road from me. I believe in the beautiful Yakima Valley, but I might be wrong on that. And if I am, I really apologize to the entire apple producing community of the Yakima Valley.
All right, thank you. Thank you both for framing the Food System Summit and these series of dialogues. It's so important for those that are particularly concerned about the climate crisis. There have been several studies that show that almost a third of global man-made greenhouse gas emissions come from food systems, and as you've already heard us describe, there are so many aspects of that. There's the land use, there's the packaging, there's all the industrial processes. And also, it's important to know that a lot of the food that is being disseminated is making people unwell, particularly in the United States context. We have over half of the calories of food from highly processed food that is linked to diseases like cardiovascular diseases and obesity and so on. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm really grateful for what's been put out there so far about the contributions from faith and wisdom and indigenous traditions. And I am really honored to ask Mona Polacca. I want to apologize to Mona for giving such a short format for the depth of indigenous wisdom, but also to say that this is only a real kind of teaser or advertisement or invitation, I should say, to the people at large to join us for further dialogues in which we will hear more from wisdom traditions and so on. And so I would love to ask you, Mona, about we know that indigenous knowledge has so much to offer us in terms of how we correct course in our humanity's relationship to the food that nourishes us. And I was wondering if you could lift up a teaching or a concept from your traditional ways that you feel would be particularly helpful for the world to know. And I think you need to unmute, just.
Oops, okay. First of all, I'd just like to greet each and every one of you and thank you for joining us. And I'll introduce my my food. I have this morning, I'm having a cornbread. And I'm also having some indigena coffee, which is organic coffee, and in this cup is this coffee, and it says that a taste of justice in every drop. And so that's what I have here this morning. And when I was preparing this morning, I fixed myself a bowl of cream of wheat, which I love because it's chilly this morning. And then I added to it some ground up nuts. Because in the winter time when it's cold, we eat dry foods, so I, the nuts are dry, and so I grind them up like my mom used to do, and I put it in my cornmeal, my cream of wheat. And the other thing I thought about was, well, what am I going to use for sweetener? And I thought about it, and I have this jug of maple syrup that I got from a tribal nation in Wisconsin, and the maple syrup comes from the tree. And I thought, that's the blood of the tree. That's the essence of the tree's life. So I put that in my cream of wheat. And so in preparing it, I'm thinking about what is the value of this food, what I'm going to take. And it's, it nurtures me, it nourishes me, it inspires me, and it vitalizes me. Thinking that way about it and partaking of it that way. And so which is part of the way that we as Indigenous people, we create and acknowledge the relationship that we have with the food that we're eating, where it came from, that it has a natural connection in life from the earth, with the water, the air, the sun, all of these, what we call the divine creations. And so so that's the way I took my food this morning. My coffee, it comes from Chiapas. I know where it comes from. I know the people that it comes from. I know how they struggled and how my relationship with them was established to support them so that they can have, the farmers can have a means of making a living to provide for their families. And so when we're talking about this, about the food system, it's not just being a commodity. There's so many deeper connections that we have to it. And so those were the things I thought about this morning as I got ready to be here with you. And so it's really, really special. It's almost like a friend of mine, she said, I want to be a berry. And what the berry does, when you eat it. She wants to be that way to the people or in her relationship to everything in her life. And so I'm grateful I could talk to you today. Everything is so special about what we consume and what we eat. It's our health. It's our identity. And it's sacred. I just want to share that much.
Thank you so much, Mona, for those quite moving words, and for sharing your personal experience with food today, which illustrates exactly what you are putting forward. It strikes me that idea of relationship, the conscious connection to what we consume, has so much potential for good. We all are learning more about the relationship between mental and physical health. And certainly feeling like you're living in integrity and bringing those things to mind about what you're putting into your body, honoring those relationships and connections is also surely good for human health, just the simple consciousness of it. And of course, faith traditions often include, particularly for big meals, a blessing of some kind. And that is something I know people do in different ways. Sometimes people do it silently just to themselves in their own way. And sometimes it's a real communal coming together. And so I just want to turn back to Andrew and Gopal for a few minutes to give us an example of some of the things you're particularly looking forward to, and to let people know how to register for these dialogues, and what else to sort of take a look at on the internet if there's some way that they can be sure to participate in this very exciting conversation about food systems and what faith, wisdom, and indigenous and spiritual traditions have to offer to policymakers as we change food systems. So can you all, the two of you back and forth a little bit, tell us what we should be excited about for these dialogues?
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks. And I think, so first off, you can go and look at faithandfood.earth. That's a website we built for this. You can see the dialogues when they're coming. You can sign up so that you can be clued in on all the information that comes out, the speakers' information, and Zoom links when they happen. These are all going to be virtual dialogues, and which is good because we can draw in voices from around the world. We can gather groups of people, and audiences that we normally wouldn't have. And, for that, I'm grateful. And I do think, and Mona, just to go back to something you said, and this is something that I'm personally excited for, is just the line you said, that food is not just a commodity. We need to see it as beyond that. And I think that's something that has really become an issue for, as the world becomes more industrialized and as food becomes more commodified, we're seeing a loss of food diversity. We're seeing a loss of traditional and cultural food stores. We're seeing almost an erasure of history through the extinction of certain food practices. And so that's something that we really want to elevate and will be elevating through these dialogues, is engaging with our Indigenous elders, with Indigenous communities, with people and cultures around the world that are find that common tie. And Gopal, you said this as well, through the table, through food, through culture and tradition, these stories that we tell and pass down, the family gatherings that happen. I know for me personally, some of my best memories are Thanksgiving at my Uncle Cliff's house, not because of the food on the table, because what that food represented and how it brought us all together. And I think that is a piece of this equation that can't get lost. We can't just see the food and hunger in these like large, spreadsheets of how much food is produced and how much food is given, because there's so much more behind that. Yes, we need to feed the hungry, and yes, we know that we need to produce and give and provide this sort of security and accessibility. But the why behind that and the how needs to correspond with the cultural traditional roots that feed more than just the body. It needs to nurture the soul and the community that is consuming it. And so for me, that's one thing I'm really excited to lift up. And, again, would love to have you be a part of this conversation. And so again, take a look at faithandfood.earth if you want to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we're doing, and sign up. And then Gopal, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I realized that I didn't share the snack that I have, and I am a little bit embarrassed to share it, but I will, in the spirit of this being a safe space and being with friends. So I have these cookies, or what we call in England biscuits. But these are shortcake biscuits with bits of dried fruit in them, and they're my favorite. But the reason I'm embarrassed is because I didn't buy them in England. I bought them in a store here in New Jersey. And it's a store that only sells groceries from the UK. And so they ship them over from the UK to sell here. And they cost me about 3 or 4 times as much as what it would cost me in England, So I'm a little bit embarrassed. I spend so much money on these biscuits or these cookies, but they're my favorites. So I share that in the spirit of transparency. But what I'm really excited about by these dialogues that we're going to be having are 2 things. First is, as what Mona was really sharing beautifully, is what can we offer from our respective traditions into the food system space that maybe policymakers and governments aren't seeing or thinking about? So what can we offer into that space in terms of whether it's new commitments from faith communities or new ideas? I think that's going to be really exciting to see what comes forward out of these dialogues from faith leaders and faith groups. But I think what's also going to be exciting and interesting is the nature of how we're doing these dialogues, because we're not just bringing faith leaders together, we're bringing activists, policymakers, frontline leaders. It's a mix of people. So it's not just faith leaders talking to other faith leaders, but we're bringing together a collection of people to really churn these issues. And from the faith side, I'm interested to see what we can learn as a faith community from people that we may not necessarily speak to, whether it's people working in development banks or policymakers or governments. Because again, I think this is a 2-way dialogue. It's not about us as a faith community speaking to the Food Systems Summit, and it's not about us just doing whatever the Food Systems Summit want us to do. It's a relationship, it's a dialogue. It's us offering something, and it's also about us learning to see how we can improve the work we're doing as well. And I think that mix is very unique about these dialogues, that we're bringing together such a dynamic range of individuals for each of the 5 dialogues, that I think the outcomes, I don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And that's what's exciting. We just don't know what's going to come out of it. I think it's going to be something good and interesting, but the direction that these conversations are going to go in, we can't predetermine. And that's really fascinating for me. So I'm really excited about how these are going to turn out going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. And thank you so much for what you shared earlier, Mona. I'm also very excited about this. It's actually, when you think about it, the dominance of this system, which is, of course, it's financialization, it's corporate managed globalization. These are huge forces that have affected our species, humanity, and of course, so many other species and living beings, which we should think about on their own, with their own intrinsic worth and lives. And it's relatively recent that this has happened. Certainly after the first two, the world wars, after World War II, of course, we know the United Nations was established right after those two massive violent conflicts. And there was a philosophy of making peace and preventing further conflict, in part by encouraging trade. And so now we're sort of reckoning with the fact that while there were, I think, about 2.4 or anyway, under 3 billion people during that time, there's now almost 8 billion people. And the kind of trade that's going on is often including so much waste, so much pollution, a very fast rate of depletion. And so I think in many ways, what we're doing here is we're humanity, we're all as a species a little bit in shock, waking up to what has happened to this, to all. We can feel the rest of our relatives in distress and the health issues and so on. And how do we fix it? It's a very big problem to fix. It does have to do with individual and community behavior as well as nation states. And so we cannot afford to turn this problem over simply to people who've been involved in politics and business and government. We need to understand that there are cultures, deep wisdom, ingrained ancestral wisdom passed down through generations, that have established relationships to food and how we eat. And of course, there's nothing that disrupts the sense of separation, the false sense that humanity is separate from the natural world. That is disrupted when we eat food grown in the soil, when we drink the waters. And so I'm really thrilled that we're able to establish this channel of communication and bring together people in this forum in order to make sure that as we make these changes, we draw from that wealth of wisdom that humanity has gathered over millennia. And in closing, I suppose I want to just ask each of you if you want to say one or two brief words to invite people to join us in the future. This is not just a one-shot thing. We're really hoping to do this work in the long haul, and these dialogues will be a kickoff for that. And then also perhaps, in the end, we can just in our own way bless our snack and invite others to go and enjoy one with us when we close. This is my potato chip. So please, starting with Mona, is there a brief word that you would like to leave us with? Oh, mute, sorry.
We are all related.
Thank you, beautiful. Andrew?
It's hard to say much more than that. No, just thank you for the time. Thank you for everyone here. Greetings, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out over any of the social media channels. We'd love to talk to you.
Gopal?
Yeah, not really much more to add from what Mona and Andrew said. This is such important, crucial work. I would say, from a Hindu perspective, we are the food we eat, not just the physical food, but the whole chain of, from seed to the people who grow it, to how it's transported. All of that energy ends up on our table every morning, noon, and night when we eat, and we become a transformation of that consciousness that's gone into that food. And so it's so important that we as faith groups look at the whole system and see how we can ensure that it's sustainable, that it protects people, that it's healthy, nutritious, all these things we've been talking about today. And so very excited about these dialogues. We're starting in May to start opening up these conversations, and as you said, Karenna, not just for those conversations, but into the long term as well. This is something I feel that all faith, wisdom, spiritual groups can get behind 100%. Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity today. And thank you for allowing me to share my snacks with all of you as well.
Thank you all so much for being with us. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. And now I want to just say, as a blessing for our snacks and for whatever you all may be enjoying and sharing at home, that if we can just think of that consciousness that Mona mentioned earlier, of the good ways that we are connected, our intentions to support the workers, the farmers, the people that harvest, the people that prepare the food, as well as the living beings, the plants and animals, and the elements, the water, the soil, the sunlight. This is a miraculous thing that we can actually bring into our minds and hearts, that feeling of connection in a positive way as we bless this food and set our intention to live in a way, individually, communally, and as nations and as a world and a species in particular, live in that good way. I'm really honored to share this snack with you all, and excited to see all of you in the dialogue to come. So blessings on our snack, and thank you.
Come on, friends.